Well, welcome everyone. Thanks very much for coming to the Lucky Ward 13 debates. We've got a lucky 7 candidates here who are all very anxious to tell you about their visions for the city. My name is Chris Mackey. I'm the Medical Officer of Health and CEO for Middlesex London Health Unit. Thrilled to have been asked to moderate this discussion by the Urban League. We have 3 sponsors this evening who have been gracious to donate a lot of time organizing and also the space here, of course. Thanks very much to the Urban League. As you'll know, the Urban League is an umbrella organization for neighborhood associations across the City of London. Has been in operation since 1974. Also to Women in Politics, which is a citizen-led initiative to enhance the voice of women in London who are interested in political issues. Of course, to the library for providing the space for this evening. It's a fantastic space, and it's ideal for this sort of great discussion. So the way we're going to run the evening is we're going to start with about 2 minutes for each candidate to introduce their vision, what they feel is important, and what they think the issues are in this campaign. We'll go on to 7 questions that have been previously selected. These are questions that were developed by the Urban League and by Women in Politics and selected at random by the candidates today. So each of them has picked a question. They'll speak for 2 minutes on, and then there'll be a number of other candidates will respond to the same question. After we've gone through those, we'll go to questions from the floor, and we're really looking forward to your input and comments this evening. How does that sound? All right, Ward 13. I was on the phone with my brother just after dinner on the way here, and I told him I was going down to moderate and debate, and he said, "Oh, you're going downstairs to step in between your 3- and 5-year-old girls?" Well, and I said, "No, this is going to be much more civilized than that." So thank you all very much for attending. It really shows what a great ward we have that people have come out today. And I'm going to waste no time in turning it over to our candidates to introduce themselves and to speak for about 2 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bardai. I've lived in Ward 13 for 27 years, and I own the business in Ward 13 for 27 years. And what I want to speak to you about is we have 5 candidates that's sitting up here that don't live in Ward 13. And they are John Fyfe-Millar, David Winger, Chris Edgar, Gordon Saylor, and Elizabeth. If all these candidates if they're as good as they say they are, why aren't they running in their own ward? This election comes down to 2 candidates. That's Tanya Park and Bardai. While I have a plan to reduce our unemployment, I have a plan to improve our economy, I have a plan to improve our transit system, and I have a plan to reduce our deficit of $360 million. I also have a plan to repair our infrastructure, a plan to reduce people that are homeless in our city, and reduce the amount of children living under the poverty level. I've seen a lot of changes come and go in Ward 13, and I think it's time we had someone with the business knowledge to step up and run Ward 13. Thank you.
So my name's David Winninger, and I'll address the issue of why I'm running in this ward further into this debate. In the meantime, I grew up in London. I'm a lawyer. I'm a former member of Parliament, and I had 10 years on City Council, but thankfully not the last 4 years because I wasn't there. But I'm back. I'm hoping I can exercise sound judgment on council. When I grew up in London, quite frankly, downtown was the place to go. That's where you went to see the movies, that's where you went to the library, that's where you went shopping, and that's where you enjoyed amenities like Victoria Park. Somewhere along the way in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, London lost its way. There was all kinds of development on the fringe. The downtown and core area that we find ourselves in seemed to be totally neglected. It became a hole in the donut. Consequently, It wasn't until late 90s when the Millennium Committee of Council decided to invest in the downtown, revitalize it, and now we see way more people living downtown, including in the high-rise buildings that have been recently constructed, than we ever did before. And that's a good thing. We need a vibrant downtown. It's our calling card to the world, as some have said. It's the original neighborhood in London. It needs to be linked with the river. And I'll develop my platform a little more as the debate goes on, because the yellow light is calling me.
I'm Chris Edgar, and as Kim pointed out, I do not live in Ward 13. I ran for council in Ward 13 in the 2010 election. I think I'm the only candidate up here that did. The reason I ran in 13 back then was I was quite content with the candidates that were running in my home Ward of 4 and didn't want to split the vote. Didn't make sense for me to switch from Ward 13 back to Ward 4 in this election, because I did build up a bit of a name recognition in Ward 13 in the 2010 election. The reason I'm running is I've heard an awful lot of complaints from people about the way the city is not functioning properly, the way councillors do not respond to the residents' concerns, and the way spending seems to be out of control. I've got a background of over 30 years working with lawyers, not as a lawyer. So I've been the one doing a lot of the investigative work, reading all the reports, figuring out the strengths and the weaknesses in various arguments, and there's always a strength and a weakness to whatever issue is put before you. I don't believe in spending money that we don't have on things that we don't need. I do believe in spending money on developing our infrastructure or repairing our infrastructure and having a good, solid foundation, because there's no point on building anything without a good, reliable foundation. And I do believe we need to reestablish the integrity of council, and would hope to accomplish that by way of example and holding true to my own sense of ethics. Thanks.
Hello everyone, I'm Tanya Park. I'm a proud resident of Ward 13. I'm the president of the Soho Community Association. And within that role, I've proven myself to be a strong advocate for Ward 13. I've championed for the strength and vitality of each of these neighborhoods at City Council during the last term. I stand for appropriate development. Each one of our neighborhoods is unique with its own character and charm, and development needs to be sensitive to that. The neighborhoods of Ward 13 will benefit the most from a rejuvenated downtown, as they will be recognized as the key places to live and invest in. It's no secret that we here in London were hit very hard by job loss. Now, municipal council cannot outright create jobs, but there's a lot the council can do to make the environment where businesses will come and invest. My team and I have canvassed the ward twice, and we're set to begin a third pass at the end of this week. During this time, I've spoken with thousands of residents of Ward 13. I understand your concerns. Our local economy is a citywide concern. However, our ward's biggest challenges continue to be development and heritage matters. We need to ensure that our infill development fits in with our neighborhoods and is cognizant of our natural areas. These need to be a key priority going forward. So as I stated earlier, City Council cannot create jobs, but we can create the environment where jobs will be created by our job creators, the businesses. We need to have a sharp focus going forward, do the smart things, so that our talent, youth, and businesses stay here in London. For more information about me or my platform, visit tanyapark.ca.
Hello, my name is Efthymiadis. It's a Greek name, in case you were wondering. It's quite difficult to pronounce. I decided to run on September 8th. That's about a month and a half ago. So I'm a newcomer on this political scene. I've heard the introductions by my fellow candidates here, and I certainly relate to a lot of the points that they brought up, and I don't want to repeat it. What made me decide to run was, of course, the events during at least the last 2 years of the former council, and speaking with Londoners, my fellow neighbors, and their concerns, and reading the comments in newspapers and things like that. And I said, what was going on there? There must be a better way to do things. There is always a right way to do things. And this is what London needs now, and this is why I'm running. I have a logical approach to problems. I have a practical approach to problems. I came to Canada some 40 plus years ago. I lived in Montreal and Toronto, and since 2006 I've been living in London. I have a background, multicultural background, multilingual. I speak 4 languages. My career rather has been in educational administration and teaching. I also worked for 15 years in Europe in a language program sponsored by the European Union. And I think I bring some leadership skills and communication skills to this position. And I would very much like to tackle the very serious problems that London is facing. Thank you.
My name is Gordon Saylor, and I'm a certified general accountant. I have 35 years of accounting, finance, and management experience, 27 years in the private sector, and the past 8 years in the not-for-profit sector, specifically Canadian Mental Health Association Middlesex branch. The experience that I have in both of these sectors is equally relevant to the role of counselor. It is always the intent in either the private sector or the not-for-profit sector to achieve the most efficient and effective use of our resources. In the private sector, we focus on profit. In the not-for-profit or public sector, the maximization of service and service delivery is the intent. I also have 20 plus years of community involvement with a diverse range of initiatives and organizations, from such things as Sifton Bog Master Plan Development to Thames Talbot Land Trust. And for the past 8 years, I've been on the board of London Middlesex Housing Corporation, which is the social housing provider for the City of London and the County of Middlesex. The experience that I have qualifies me for both components of this counselor's role. The first part of the role, as we all know, is to provide governance for the city. That is to maintain the financial integrity of the city and maintain the integrity of the programs and the services that the city offers. A counselor must also be able to move the vision for the city forward. The second part of the role of a counselor is to provide stewardship, in this case for Ward 13, to ensure that the voices of Ward 13 have an ear at City Hall and in turn a voice at City Hall. I've lived in London 40 years. 35 of those years I've been in Wortley Village, which is 2 minutes south of the river. Probably closer to some parts of Ward 13 than some of the other candidates who've avowed their residency in the ward.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Fyfe-Millar. I know a great deal of you have had a chance to read some of the material we've sent out, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I'm going to give you a little background on myself. First and foremost, I'm a family man, and one of the reasons that I chose to run for council is a greedy reason, and that is I want my children to have a place to work and raise their children in this city, to not leave. Secondly, I want to leave my children a legacy other than a deficit when I go. I'm a small businessman in this city. I've owned a business for 35 years. For 30 years of that, we've been in Blackfriars. When I look at business, I think sometimes it's not the harsh things that you that are most important. It's the soft sells. It's the ability to build relationships and collaborate with other companies. I've been able to do that for 35 years. As a community contributor, when I lived in Byron and I was 17 years old, I coached hockey, I coached soccer. Today I've traded that up. I traded hockey for homelessness at times. I traded soccer for syringes with regional HIV/AIDS. Everything's important and everything has its place. For me, Ward 13 was a perfect choice. I play in Ward 13. I work in Ward 13, and my choice is to live here with the renovations at the Bud Gowan building when they're complete. Ward 13 has it all. Historic neighborhoods, new development, world-class education, and dynamic natural landscapes, all within walking distance of one another. All the pieces to build a brighter, vibrant future for this city are in this ward, and I would love to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we're now going to move on to the prepared questions.
How are you going to know your neighbors? How are you going to know what your community needs? How are you going to know what the businesses need? How do you know what's going on in your community and how you can help and how you can show yourself? I absolutely believe that you do need to live in the ward that you're representing. If you're not, why aren't you living there? And I always have to question.
Cross in my backyard Wonderland Road. If I throw a stone across Wonderland Road, if I'm not too old to do it, it lands in Ward 9. I'm also right at the edge of Ward 10. So if I throw a stone across Commissioner's Road, it lands in Ward 10. So how much do I have in common with each of those wards that I can throw a stone into? Well, I live there, the Blackfriars community, and I'm passionate about the development of the downtown.
Obviously, since I live in Ward 4, I don't believe it's important to live in the ward that you quite frequently end up in Ward 13 for personal reasons as well as for business reasons. When I was working full-time, each of my employers were in Ward 13. I have an understanding of what's going on in Ward 13. I do spend a lot of time down here. I probably spend more time talking to people in Ward 13 than I do in my home Ward 4, because you tend to just get to know the people in your immediate.
So as I mentioned before, I do live in the ward, and I'm very proud to say that. I have canvassed quite a bit, began back in April, and in speaking with most of you, the main question I'm asked off the hop is, do you actually live here? I feel it's important, and many residents do too. They want to know that their candidate has some skin in the game. That's all I have to say.
Going to move to David's question. David drew the question, do you support an integrity commissioner for London, or do you support having this
And so on. Why is it important that we have an integrity commissioner for London? And I support that. I alluded to the 4 years I wasn't on council from 2010 to 2014, and there were innumerable instances where the need for an integrity commissioner in London, but there's many other issues of conflict of interest. For example, looked at many different options, having a lawyer or integrity commissioner on retainer for a certain amount of money. We looked at paying an integrity commissioner a per diem or an hourly rate. We came to the conclusion that we should have an integrity commissioner for London, that we should pay a modest retainer to have an integrity commissioner for London, but if the investigations took a long period of time, then the integrity commissioner should be paid extra for that. We all look at City Hall and we judge it in terms of the openness, transparency, integrity. And if you don't have that, you don't have much at all.
I, on the other hand, do not believe it's necessary to have an integrity commissioner. I think that the Ombudsman's office is quite capable of overseeing issues that might arise. If council is prepared to act with transparency and openness and honesty and hold true to their own sense of ethics, I don't see the need for anybody to be overseeing their integrity.
The Ombudsman does not give the Ombudsman's office the power to, investigate matters of code of conduct and breaches thereof. And tell us about his role as a municipal integrity commissioner throughout Ontario. And he said that what he typically does is he charges a municipality a retainer of $5,000, and more often than not, his annual fee for that municipality is not over $20,000. So as we've seen in London over the past 4 years, the honor system is not working anymore. We need an integrity commissioner.
I don't agree with an integrity commissioner just for London. I think integrity is integrity whether it's in London or in Toronto or anywhere else. There are rules, deontological rules, rules of behavior, and I think that the Toronto, or the Ontario rather, Ombudsman is fully equipped and certainly able and capable of judging integrity questions. There is also the question of maybe the salary. I don't know what level of income that would represent. I don't think we should add to the expenses of city council right now, or city hall. And again, it's probably in reaction to what was happening in our last council that the question of an integrity commissioner for London came up. Now that we are having a new council, that may not be the case at all. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question, Chris will start with his question, and the question is, high-quality city services like libraries and recreation programs make for healthy, livable cities. How would you go about deciding between budgets for these programs versus other needs?
I do agree that libraries and recreation programs are extremely important services to maintain. Top priority for budgeting considerations, in my opinion, should be given always to the core basics, such as the infrastructure. And before you cringe, I do consider the importance of each budget request on a case-by-case basis. And before you approve or reject any idea, you have to weigh the cost-benefit of your decision to the city as a whole. Thank you.
Libraries and community centers are neighborhood hubs. They're where communities are built, where they're strengthened, and they are so important. When it comes down to budgeting, we have to remember that Londoners depend on these services. Most newcomers to London, the library is one of the first places they interact with our municipality. I think inconsistent budgeting does not do any favors to our library system. I would like to see council commit to a 4-year budget for the libraries so that they can do more with less. Every year they don't know what their budget's going to be, and planning going forward for that is an absolute nightmare for them. So if we want to continue to have core services in our library that we can stand up and be proud of, we need to have consistent budgeting.
I have to start with one remark, and that is that for the 2014 budget, the library made a fantastic effort and did not ask for any increase, which is, I think, a very good point to raise. I agree with those that are for a sustainable budget and a budget that's pre-planned, because I do also believe that library and recreational programs are very important to a community. It's a hub for students, for adults, for seniors. It's the heart of a community in terms of education, in terms of leisure. It is very important to support our libraries and the recreational programs.
So pardon me. In my opening remarks, I commented on the role of the councillor to preserve the entity. So we start from the premise that the existing services remain in place and grow if possible. How do we decide between enhancing those services? Because we would never step back from what's in place today. So we look at enhancing those services. What do we do to determine if we add additional budget dollars to those programs? Well, we compare to what the other asks are. I mean, there will be asks coming from every place in the city. So we weigh, I also mentioned, service delivery and outcomes. So we look at the outcomes we get from our libraries and our recreational programs. We compare that to what's put forward in other proposals. And we, I hate to say it, we look at that from a business-like perspective. Decide what are the most and best outcomes we're going to achieve with the dollars that we're going to be using.
So the next question is for Tanya to start, and the question is, so the way we've got the format is that we have one person speaking for 2 minutes and then 3 people speaking for 1 minute each. It's a time saver. We have 7 candidates. Fortunately, they've all attended today, which is great. But yeah, we're cycling through. And if you'd like to hear a specific candidate's answer on a specific question, you're welcome to ask it in the questions from the floor, which we're, I'd say, about 2/3 of our way towards. So I'll turn it over to Tanya to answer the question about school boards. The school boards are closing elementary schools. Do you support the city spending money to acquire some of these properties? And if so, what uses would you support?
I do support the purchase of these lands so long as they are strategically placed. Schools are neighborhood hubs and they need to remain as such. So if the city were to purchase a parcel of land, I would like to see it stay as a park, perhaps a satellite library, or anything like that where the community has use of that space.
I also support the purchase of these schools that are closing. And as for the use of the building and the land, I think it would depend on the needs of the neighborhood. You would have to assess what it is that the neighborhood needs or would like to have, because certainly residents do have a say. Perhaps a community center, a recreation facility, a park, if there isn't enough green in the area, or even possibly affordable housing, if it is an area where you have people who are homeless or who are on waiting list for affordable housing and so on. So it really depends on the needs of the community in which that school is located. Thank you.
So I certainly support in principle the idea of the city acquiring schools that are being closed. I'll cite 2 examples. Lorne Ave Public School, which is on the verge of closing, would make an incredible community hub, and there's been demonstration in the community. That's exactly the purpose that people would like to be using it for. Another example, though, is Manor and Highland Park School on Tecumseh Ave. That school was closed, it was sold, and the intention was to repurpose that school for affordable housing. Great intent, but when they actually got in there and started looking at it, they discovered that the cost was far greater than it would cost to actually demolish the building and build new housing. So we have to look at the 2 factors. I mean, number one, the cost of doing that, but then the community need and what the community can come forward and do. And in the case of Lorne Ave, I mean, the community has demonstrated exactly what that school should be used for.
So you're going to get hub for the neighborhood probably for the fourth time going down the line. Schools have been strategically placed in this city, and as they close, they do turn into excellent hubs for neighborhoods, for areas such as libraries and physical fitness areas for children and students. I do think that it is important to weigh out the cost-benefit analysis of keeping it there. We know the buildings as they are right now, and a good strategy to move forward is to try to use the buildings in their current form. There's a low cost to that, and it gives us a creative venture. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Elizabeth, and the question is, what are the three most important city services to maintain and grow, and explain why you picked these three?
The first one is public transit. I am all for expansion of our public transit. It is to ensure that all workers are taken to and fro their place of work, for also just the general population to go to their business, whatever that may be. There are, first I'd like to the bus line, and yet there are of the Veterans Memorial Parkway, which is presently not serviced by any bus line, and yet there are companies there that have workers, and workers do not make use of our transit system because it simply does not take them to their place of work. The other thing is the 6 o'clock news. I don't know if any one of you have heard it. Western students are complaining about their bus service, line 33, which is kind of going through some disruptions right now. They're not on schedule. Some buses just go past the stop without stopping at all because they're so full. So we do have a problem even servicing our students, which is a major component of London. So this is the first service that I would certainly want to maintain and to grow and to ameliorate, to improve. The second one is the infrastructure. We have, especially in Ward 13, we have a very old infrastructure, 100 years old, counting, and we need a replacement. There is no fund for that, so we need to look at that. It's our health that's at work, at play. I'm sorry, I'm seeing that red light and I'm panicking. And the last one is the recycling program, where you need the composting, and you need also to look at transforming waste to energy. The technology is there. We need to look at that, how to make use of waste.
Three essential city services: social and affordable housing, because there's a crying need in this city for housing for those, number one, that are homeless or on the verge of homelessness, but also to bring stability to the lives of far more people than that, people that are living in substandard and poor housing. Number two, parks and recreation programs. We are an increasingly sedentary society. Our children are growing up watching television, playing video games, so every opportunity where we can afford them the opportunity to get outdoors, engage in physical activity, and at least even enjoy outdoors. And number three is library services. We've all indicated in the last question that libraries are the hubs of our communities. We need to increase that.
First, I have roads and transportation, or infrastructure. The infrastructure in Ward 13 in downtown is getting old, it's getting aged, and it needs to be dealt with. When you look at the downtown, the effects that that's going to have on Ward 13 as we start to update that will be challenging at times, but it's something that we need to take on. Second is planning and development. I look at planning and development as the future of our city, but it's also the future of our cash flow. As planning and development goes, our cash flow increases as a city through the ability for us to tax. Lastly, and it's a large one, is social services. We need to find a better way to deliver our social services. The reality is, when we look at it today, our social services strip away the dignity and the respect from people who are using it. And we need to find a better way, a better system to deliver it properly. Thank you.
Well, most of the great ideas have already been spoken for. The few things I would like to touch base on is our clean water system, infrastructure for providing clean water. I think that's very crucial to be able to carry that on for years to come, and maybe even 20, 30 years, and we have to find better ways to provide clean water. The other one is transit, which has already been spoken about. We have to find a better way to get people from point A to point B, and from point B to point A. And if we could do that, then we'll have less cars on the road and more people using the transit. And the other one basically is low-income housing. We have to find better ways, maybe even work with new landlords, new construction companies, and give them incentives so that, you know, maybe they could provide 1 or 2 units in each of their development to low-income housing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask, we're doing fairly well, but I'll just ask each candidate to try and keep an eye on the lights up here. Yellow again is 30 seconds left, and red means you're done. So the 6th question is about the London plan. The London plan is London's new draft land use plan and vision for London 25 years from now. What are 2 things you like about the London plan, and what are 2 things that concern you?
I've read the London plan. I've not studied it, but I can make a couple of general comments on it. Sean Galloway of the planning department will tell you that literally thousands of Londoners were involved in the development of that plan. It was written by City Hall, but the ideas were spawned by Londoners. I've been involved in a number of initiatives in the city where citizen participation is drastically low. In a case like this, what we have is thousands of Londoners coming forward to develop this plan. I think that's the number one most impressive thing about it. Number 2, the crux of the plan is the idea of building up, not out. So when you look at the plan, the idea is to stop the urban sprawl that's been going on in this city for decades, and to start concentrating on corridors within the city where we can start to build the city up and make use of a transit system more efficiently than we do now. A couple of things that I'm not so keen on in the plan, I suppose, is number 1, bus rapid transit. Fantastic idea, but one of the things we don't know is what the cost of that would be. The plan, the structure of the city is developed to support bus rapid transit, but the rollout of that is a cost item that we have no idea about at this particular point. The other thing that I find a little troubling about the plan as well is that as they were going through the consultation process, while thousands of Londoners were involved in that, average citizens with average concerns about the city, the one part of the city that really wasn't engaged in that was the commercial development community in the city. And they're the ones that effectively grow the city by growing neighborhoods or growing subdivisions, but they weren't involved in that initial consultation phase, and I think we missed out on that opportunity.
Okay, I'll have to shorten the 4 points down to pretty quick. First, I love the idea of the smart city. A smart city is a vibrant city. Vibrant cities aren't just about being able to sit in Victoria Park and check out the Detroit Red Wings hockey score. It's going to come down to things like being able to hail a cab on your phone. It's going to be coming down to your bus shelters, not only telling you what buses come there, but how far the bus is away from that. It will give us a great opportunity. Affordable housing throughout the city. Again, I love the fact that it removes the stigma away from affordable housing. I will echo what was said next to me. A cross-section from the business perspective. When I took involvement in it, I was involved as a resident and not as a business owner. And I think we have to be careful. We are a 4-season city. When we look at bike lanes and such, they're great, but if we're going to use them for 4 seasons, we have to remember they have to be kept clean as snow. Thank you.
Well, the two plans that I really like is the infills, new condominiums, apartment buildings, bring more people to downtown and having an economy being built in downtown, and every city needs a downtown. And the other one I also I favor is sprawling, no more sprawling. We only have so much farmland, and we can't make farmlands, folks. We cannot make farmlands. So we have to save what we have and treasure what we have. And by stopping sprawling was great. The other one is transit system. I would like to see the transit systems broken up to 5 stages instead of one full commitment. And the second one I'm really concerned about is rapid disaster unit. We don't have one, and we have this hazardous materials that go through in our trains, going through our downtown to our community, and especially, no one thought what would happen, Lou McGunty would have happened there. And same thing, we should be prepared for something like that. Thank you.
There's so many reasons to like the London plan: residential intensification, compact development, infilling, protection of our woodlands, wetlands, farmland, transit-oriented development. I could go on and on. It really brought a dull old official plan to life in London. If I had 2 concerns, one would be that the provision for affordable housing in new developments is only 25%. When I was on the Affordable Housing Committee of Council, we recommended 30%. Secondly, if you're going to make a pedestrian mall downtown between Rideout and Wellington or Waterloo or Colburn, why would you allow cars but not buses? It makes no sense whatsoever to me, but that's part of the London plan. As far as the cost of bus rapid transit, we do know the amount. I'm chair of LTC, and we know between now and the year 2030, the cost would be $380 million. Right now, we're spending $64 million a year on running our bus service in London.
Thank you. So this will be our final question from the pre-prepared questions, so please get your questions from the floor ready to go. John, your question is, as London becomes more multicultural and diverse, am I reading the same question you have? No, this is a different one. Can you read your question for me?
I got the party question. At the end of your time on City Council, how would you like to be remembered at your farewell party? And I'm going to get 2 minutes on that question, and I'm going to shorten it down very, very well. I want to be remembered as a good listener. I want to be remembered as somebody who is quick to take care of issues and concerns of people. I want to be remembered as somebody who embraces our history but looks forward to our future. That's nice and short. I'm going to answer your question now on the library. The fact with the libraries, they are our outreach to our community. Libraries are extremely important in this city, and we can't give them up. Thank you.
Well, I want to be remembered as the great neighbor, a friend, the guy that always gave you a helping hand, guy that listened, the fellow that, whenever you called you back, whenever you emailed you back, a fellow that just was a good old boy, just a great friend and great listener, and guy that just constantly came and gave you a helping hand. Like you could ask my neighbors. I'm the guy that would go mow their lawn, plow their snow, just a good old fellow. Thank you.
You'll be pleased to know I'm not expecting any farewell party anytime soon, but if you did throw one for me, I'd like to be remembered, and I did, as I said, serve on council for 10 years, as an honest politician. I know that may seem a little unusual to you, that I always stood up on what I felt was appropriate, even when it meant telling the taxpayers the honest message that you can't sustain a 0% increase in taxes for 4 years. and that you can't just wave a magic wand and 10,000 jobs appear in London during one mandate of council. It's a wonderful dream, and it may happen, but I think you have to be honest. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep. I can't think of one promise I ever made that I can't keep, and I suppose I'd like to be remembered as a good old boy as well.
Can I say no thanks, please, to the good old boy designation? Kim, I'd love to help you out by having you over to cut my lawn for me. How's this weekend? You're in the wrong ward. True. Won't get my vote if he runs for mayor then. At the end of my term, if I'm successful, I would like to be remembered as the person who consistently demonstrated integrity and common sense, and who treated everyone, residents, visitors, city staff, and fellow councillors with respect. From a letter to the editor I saw in the Free Press today, I already have a designation as someone who listens. Thanks.
Well, thanks very much to all of the candidates. We know you put a lot of time into preparing for those questions, and it really came across. So we'll turn now to questions from the floor. If you do end up asking a question, please try to keep it to around a minute, because we don't want the questions to go on too long. We really want to hear from the candidates. Well, there's a big lineup over here, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, sure. My question's pretty short and easy. I'd like to know how where each of the candidates stands on the proposed, semi-proposed overpass on Adelaide Street.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just remind the candidates that we'll keep these answers to 1 minute, please.
You want me to start?
Sure.
Sure. The overpass on Adelaide Street, we still don't know what the cost of the overpass is. And you know what? We do need something, because we can't just keep using Talbot Street as an overpass when the trains are coming. And sometimes those trains just stop for 40 minutes. And I think we need another overpass, but we have to take a look at the cost of it. Like I said, London's already in a $360 million deficit, and we got to figure out how we're going to get out of that deficit before we start spending money. But you know what? Once again, it comes down to cost and what we have left in the budget.
The overpass really shouldn't cost London anything, because it's a CP project that needs to be done. But if I were to answer the question, I would say I wouldn't be supporting an overpass. It would be tremendously disruptive to the people of Woodfield. Maybe an underpass if CP wanted to pay for it, but not an overpass. We saw with the Hale Trafalgar overpass, it tied up the neighborhood for years. It may benefit largely people from outside of this particular ward, but it's not very favorable to the people living in Ward 13.
I'll echo Kim's comments and say that you need to consider the cost of all of these things and whether or not CP would pony up and pick up their share of the expenses or all of the expenses, or whether or not the city is going to get stuck with the whole thing.
I too support an underpass, not an overpass. When we look at the Quebec Street overpass, we see what's happened to that neighborhood over there, and it's cast a big shadow on that area. Where we need traffic to flow in an efficient manner, we also need to be very sensitive to the people living near that proposed overpass.
I'm in favor of taking trucks away from the city altogether. It's dangerous to have trains going through urban areas. But again, to answer specifically your question, I am in favor of an underpass as well as some of my fellow candidates. And I don't think the cost is that prohibitive, and CP certainly should have enough money to pay for it. Thank you.
underpass instead of overpass. The one at Wellington and York Street works quite well. I think, as everyone else has said, it comes down to cost. If we get the right partners on board, I think it's, well, I know that, we can find the city money to do it. Part of that discussion then becomes, if not new money, what do we take money from to make that happen? We always, it's not something that has to happen next year or the year after that. I mean, a long-term strategy could be put in place so that those dollars are put into reserve until such time as we do get funding from either the federal.
I think when you look at cities today, progressive cities use underpasses. Very, very few of them are moving towards overpasses anymore. I think underpasses will do much less to deteriorate from the look of the Woodfield area. I think that's important. It is a heritage area to the city, and I think we have to recognize that. And I think an underpass would suit that area much more.
Thank you. We did have a line spring up very quickly here, so I'm going to take one more question from this side, and then we'll go to the other side.
Folks, I'm with a citizens group called KnowBeforeYouVote.ca. This is a health issue question. Many Ontario municipalities, the State of Israel, they have stopped adding fluoride to their water. Very quick answer, yes or no, if elected. Will you stop adding fluoride to the water? We have 32 candidates, folks, have signed this petition that they will stop fluoride, and we're fortunate to have 3 of them here tonight, which is Kim, Chris, and Elizabeth. So thank you for your support and caring about the health of people, and will the rest of you please answer accordingly?
I didn't sign the petition. I'm familiar with the research. I'm familiar with the fact that there are many advocates for removing fluoride from the system. But I can also say that before I was born, my older sister had a lot of tooth decay. As soon as I was born, and when fluoride was introduced to the water of London, none of the other 4 children in our family had any tooth decay. I mean, I think I had my first cavity when I was 40, but quite frankly, that's anecdotal. But there's a municipality in Maine that has fluoride naturally occurring in the water. And the people of that good city have much lower tooth decay compared to many other municipalities across the states that do not have fluoride in the water. So I'm not prepared to take that gamble, and I won't sign the petition.
That was a long yes or no.
Well, yours was a long question, but that's okay.
It's all fair, brother.
I had received your information, but it was very one-sided, and I've yet to conduct my own research on the other side of the argument, so I'm a maybe.
Sure. Yeah, you can say what you want.
Okay, I did sign the pledge because I read from the literature that fluoride is effective if it's applied, not ingested. So I don't see why I should drink another chemical, and that's why I signed. Thank you.
I support fluoridation. I'll tell you why. I grew up on a farm in northern Ontario. We drank well water, probably the purest water that we could have had. Both of my brothers had false teeth by the time they were 20. I've lived in London 40 years. My sons were both born in London. Neither one of them, at the age of 29 and 28, neither one of them have a cavity to this point. And I suspect that's because of fluoridation in the water.
First, I just want to confirm, are you asking me personally to remove it, or just have it removed?
If you get elected as a councillor.
At this point in time, I'd say no. To me, fluoridation is all about science. I'm not a scientist. I'm a printer at the end of the day. But I would look to people like the gentleman at the far end of the table standing. I would probably defer to him as somebody who would give us input on that, and so that's what I would do.
So we had our first question from the floor started with Kim, the next one started with David, so the next one we'll have Chris start, and why don't you go ahead and ask?
I'm going to assume for the purposes of my question that all of you are in support of the arts in life in general. My question, though, is more specific. I want to know what you feel is the responsibility of a municipal government to support the arts and what priority that has in municipal government.
I do believe that the arts are very important to society as a whole.
I'm assuming that.
And I do get a little bit distressed every time I hear of arts programs, and specifically music programs, being cut from the school programs due to funding. It's something that we have to try and find funding for. There are so many issues in this city that need to be addressed, and there is only so much money to go around. So I would look to partnerships with various groups that have a strong interest in the arts and in promoting the arts, and making those programs available to all of Londoners, not just those who can afford to spend the money on expensive tickets to venues that other people can't afford. I've heard a lot of comments from people in the ward that that would be nice, if it can be done. I'm being cut off.
As an employee of a performing arts center, a very small one in town, I'll tell you how important that the arts are to this city. The London Arts Council gave out the report earlier on this year that showed that with only a $2 million investment, the arts and culture in this city actually employ over 7,000 people. It's an incredibly powerful community that we have in the arts and culture sector. We had the London Arts Council actually question all of us here, and one of my answers was that I would like to see more funding put into the CAP 2, I'm speaking jargon, investment, grant, yeah, there we go. So the grant that goes to the CAP 2 arts in the city, I'm still speaking jargon, goes to community organizations such as the Arts Project, etc., and that money comes through the London Arts Council. The other level of funding has to go to an organization that their income is over $1 million per year. That clearly goes to the Grand and to Orchestra London. The other is another more even playing field, so that smaller venues, smaller arts organizations, music, and I'm done.
I do think that the arts are very important, and not only for Londoners on a personal basis, but also they can attract tourism, and we certainly want to attract tourists to our city. It's a source of revenue. I don't have the exact figures. Tanya just mentioned 2 million and employing 7,000, which is fantastic. A city has to have a thriving arts community reflecting its fabric, its soul, and I think we need to support our arts venues and our arts manifestations and events to the maximum. I don't know the budgets, I cannot give you figures, but I'm all for supporting the arts in general, whether it's fine arts or music or new venues or whatever is in your program, and I did see your program and it's very good. The 3 strategies that London Arts has developed. Thank you.
Sports, which is supported by the city or municipal governments, gives us something to do with our time and helps to keep us healthy, but arts, all forms of arts, record our lives, record the lives of our society, and reflects it back at us. I mean, that is how, as an intelligent, emotional society moving forward, we remember where we've been and what we've done, and helps us reflect on where we will be moving forward. So yes, absolutely, municipal government has a role to play in supporting the arts, just as provincial and federal governments do. But more importantly, citizens of the City of London, any city, have a responsibility to support the arts as well through bums and seats.
I think one of the things that we have to say is that the arts community here is great at collaboration. And I think one of the groups that they collaborate well with, and I'm gonna say this is important to me, business in this city is fabulous with the arts. Business always steps up, business is always there. And I think that the municipal government needs to take sight of that, because the reality is, while it can fall back constantly onto the business community, the arts programs that run in this city are second to none. And the city needs to push that out, not just in the city, but throughout southwestern Ontario, and bring people here. The reality is, we talk about getting people into London. Our arts community will do that for us, and that's worth a few dollars out.
Well, the municipal government subsidizes sports teams. We subsidize sports field. We subsidize hockey. Why aren't we subsidizing art? Exactly. Right, sister, I got you. Yes. Why are we subsidizing art? I think it's very clear that we need to work with the local artists and local schools and local drama classes and so on, to find ways so we can subsidize these art classes for kids that want to get involved.
So London, as you know, has a long and illustrious history of arts and culture. And it may not be to everyone's liking, but I've always supported the arts in London. Big venues like Orchestra London and the Grand Theatre, smaller venues like the Fringe Festival, and many other stages and forms of art and exhibitions in London. In London, we want to be a creative city. And the only way you can be a creative city is to fund the arts and culture according to their needs. But there's also an economic imperative. The nexus is that every dollar invested in the arts brings back $7 in tax revenues to the city. And that's a good investment. That may be a better investment than expensive sports venues, where we subsidize heavily the ice time for hockey. And since I try to obey the law and red lights, I'll turn it over.
Okay. So we're back over here. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Teek Abdi, and I'm Executive Director for the African Community Council. I have a comment and a question. And my comment is, I was just hoping tonight to hear Ward 13, poverty reduction, and mental health, and I haven't heard much about that. So that's what I'm quite surprised. That's a comment I'm making, because downtown is, if you see it and walk around, and that's quite disturbing. So it's my opinion. And my question is, I represent the Africans, original and Africans, Canadians here in London, about 18,000. And we have visible minority who make up 20% of this city. And a lot of them have a barrier: mental health, cultural, language, so on. It's most of them, London at large, suffering employment. We suffering the worst. So in order to help and close the gap, this minority employment issue, the city staff had a town hall meeting and met this community. And it's a recommendation city staff made the council. They are waiting new council to arrive. If you get elected, are you going to support this proposal to help the minority visible for employment issue this city? If not, why?
So, if I hear you correctly, You're talking about a proposal to support employment of visible minorities in the city.
This study has been done for the city staff and the city council, current council,
Okay.
but they don't have time for 2015, the budget. So they are waiting, they put it on hold for the new council. So
Candidates,
if
do you all
get
have a
elected-
question?
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with the question? Okay, we're going to start at Tanya this time.
I support helping anyone finding a job in London, and I don't think that any support should be given to one particular group, although I do empathize with 20%, that's a huge amount, but I think the same support should be afforded to everyone.
Maybe you haven't get quite the question. If you want, I can rephrase. Okay, London is suffering high employment. They are Londoners, we are Londoners, we are Canadians. My question is, this visible minority who is struggling, who has a barrier, are you supporting to move forward to help them or not? You can't just dance
I'm
around.
supporting to move forward to help everyone. It's a huge problem citywide. No matter where you move from, what citizenship you have, it's a huge problem
Sir,
citywide.
I think you're
Thank
going to
you
have
very
to
much.
accept
Next
that
slide.
answer. Thanks.
I often think that here in London or in every city I lived in Canada has a lot of programs to help those that need help. And I often thought that the problem is not so much the lack of programs as much as lack of information. I don't know to what extent you are aware of all the support programs that are available for visible minorities or people with some barriers, as you said. I don't know exactly what barriers you're referring to. But it's also a question of getting hold of the support programs. You may be aware that the federal and provincial government have now recognized that their responsibility in reducing poverty, and they are granting funds that were previously not available.
The short answer is that I support equal opportunity and I support equal access to the point of the city doing what's necessary to encourage that philosophy is widespread throughout the city, widespread throughout organizations and companies within London.
Thank you.
I'll echo that statement. I support equal opportunity, I support equal access, but I would look at helping, I would help any Londoner. I would never make it specific. To me, there's a theory that you have, and that is when you're moving somewhere, you always put your hand behind and you grab the hand that's behind you and pull them forward. I don't care who it is.
I too echo the same as John Gord there. I mean, we have to have equal opportunity for everyone. Because if you start favoring one organization over another organization, then we're just going to have one of those domino effect. One organization will say, well, you did it for him, well, why can't you do it for us? Then the next one will say, well, you did it for the other two. I think equal opportunity should be for everyone.
There's a lot of work to be done in London to combat poverty. 20% of our children, it's estimated, live in poverty. If we're going to design effective anti-poverty strategies, we need to consult and continue to consult with community members and community organizations. And when it comes to measures, I'm talking about affordable housing, which is probably key to avoiding poverty. I'm talking about a food charter so that we can make food available, healthy, nutritious food, to people who may not be able to afford it. And we need to take initiatives and continue to take initiatives to move people from hostels to housing. to create jobs, because jobs are vital to combating poverty. And there's a whole host of other measures that are contemplated and can be taken. But I stress, we can't do it without consultation with community members or organizations like your own.
I too support having programs available equally across the board to those who need them. But I'll extend that to say we need to determine what the barriers are for specific groups. If specific groups are encountering more difficulty in getting work than others. And once those barriers are identified, then we can work towards finding a solution. But people need to have work in order to feel like they're contributing to society and in order to put roofs over their heads. So we need to help people get the skills they need to get the work.
Thank you. Our next question.
Hi, my name's Doug Peck. I'm very concerned about the closure of Aberdeen Public School. I am a United Church minister in the Kintor area, in the Zora Township area, and the councillors there and the mayor of Zora Township made a motion to be against any school closures in their township, and the councillors lobbied, and the mayor, Mayor Lupton of Zora Township, lobbied against the closure of one of their schools, A.J. Baker. A.J. Baker was slotted to be, recommended to be closed last night, and that was unanimously turned down because of the lobbying efforts of all kinds of people in the community. Now, with that in mind, we're talking about school closure as though it's already happened. In many cases it has. In Aberdeen, it has not yet. What can you do to... my question is, what do you think the importance of a school is in a village? And next question is, what can you do to save it? Aberdeen.
Thanks very much. And are we on to you, Elizabeth, to start this one?
The school board must have its criteria to determine what school is going to be closed. They certainly have budgetary concerns when they decide to close a school, and I don't know to what extent me as a counselor I could influence their decision. It's not there is no easy answer here. One would have to consider why it is being closed, if there is any way of salvaging it, if there is any way maybe of twinning the village with another community. I'm not familiar with a particular case, so I cannot give a definite answer.
I think if we want families with children to move into neighborhoods, we absolutely have to have a school. If we close schools, then the contra to that is that families with those children aren't coming, so we've accomplished what we intended. We've eliminated the need for the school. We have to also recognize that we have in some areas falling enrollment, but I don't think that should be the sole factor that decides whether or not a school stays open. We mentioned earlier Lauren Ave as an example, and the efforts underway in the community to repurpose that. And I think that opportunity is available with every school that sits there. I mean, enrollment is dropping. Let's look for alternative uses so that we can maintain that school and keep it open.
Let me say from my perspective, counselors never close schools. School boards close schools. Our job is to make sure the schools in the city stay open. And we work with the neighborhoods to ensure that. The reality of schools in neighborhoods, people's lives run around those schools, they run around the schedules with their children and so on and so forth. There's a direct social impact on families and on communities when they close schools. And I think it's very important that as a school board, we always keep that in mind when they move forward. But as a counselor, I would work with you and I would work with your community as hard as I could to ensure that school stayed open.
Well, most of my reasoning has been said here already, and I echo what John just said. You know what? I too would work with the community, with the individuals, and try to keep the school open, and try to see what we can do to keep the schools open.
Okay, so as a counselor, I served on what's called an ARC, a review committee. I was involved in looking at the effects of closing Manor and Highland Park School, Brick Street School, and folding them all into Woodland School. I stood firmly against closing Manor and Highland Park School. Brick Street was a special situation because students were already coming there from all over the city. So we spent 9 months of meetings. The administration at the school board wanted to close Brick Street and Manor Park and had set everything up in favor of Woodland. Most of the people on the committee, I think it might even have been unanimous, wanted to keep Manor Park open. I went to 2 meetings of the school board. I pleaded to keep it open. The school board closed Manor Park, and as you heard earlier, it was supposed to be repurposed, but wasn't. And incidentally, Manor Park School was the only school in London that had a hardwood roller skating rink in the auditorium, and I learned that through serving on the art committee. But it's not funny business. These are community hubs, and
I'll just ask you to wrap your answer up.
That's very diplomatic.
Thank you.
Well, I more or less echo the sentiment. I don't know what City Council can do exactly to prevent a school being closed if the school board has determined it has to close. Obviously, neighborhoods change, enrollment in various schools declines over the years, and then sometimes it will rebound and they'll find a need for a school again. If it's possible to keep the school open by having another organization share the cost of keeping the school open, I think it would be worthwhile working with the various organizations to see if that can be accomplished.
I believe in full transparency. I actually sat on the Accommodation Review Committee for Aberdeen. It was probably one of the longest, most heart-wrenching experiences of my life, but what I kept in my mind the entire time I was on that committee was my late father went to a one-room schoolhouse, and when he was in grade 6, they all got moved up to the big school. There was a huge controversy in that community at that time about the closing of that one-room schoolhouse. They moved to the bigger school. They got better education. They got better services to the students. They had better supports for their students. And as hard as it was for me as a parent of an Aberdeen student, I did vote in favor of the mega school on Trafalgar Street because I see a great benefit to having better resources for our children's education. The schools that are on that Accommodation Review Committee are some of the most gorgeous buildings in those neighborhoods. They need to stay hubs, but we also need to make sure that our children are getting the best education possible.
Great. I think we'll have probably time for just 2 more questions, unfortunately, and we are over here.
Yes, my name is Wayne Lumps. I had a situation last year. I contacted my city councilor because my landlord had ignored fixing my roof for 2 years. Her answer was she could not help me because she only represented the collective. So my question to all of you, who will you represent? The city to us, or are you there to represent us to the city? And the city is the one that wouldn't fix my roof.
And we're starting with Gordon for this question. Go ahead.
In my opening comments, I alluded to 2 roles of a counselor. One is to represent the city to you, but the other, that's equally as important, is to represent you to the city. I can do nothing more than commit to that. People that know me will tell you that I do not do anything halfway. I do not do anything half-hearted. As counselor, I commit to those 2 roles wholeheartedly. I don't think I can fix your roof, but I'll certainly see what the city can do about getting your landlord to fix your roof.
First, I'm gonna echo what Gordon said. I can't fix your roof either, so it's not. Oh, but I would represent you. I represent the residents of the ward. When we sit at a council meeting, I am a representative of the city in voting on things that take place. That's why I'm called a London councillor. I'm not a Ward 13 councillor. So I represent you to the city. I would always be there for you on your behalf. I would ensure that I was available, and I would ensure that I would get you an answer. Now, I would never guarantee you that it would always be the answer that you wanted to hear, but what I will tell you is I will deliver it to you.
We as people are representing people. So I'm there to represent you, Wayne. And when you ask me a question, I'll find the answer. Whether you like it or not, I will find you the answer. And we might not like the answer, but you know what? I will go search and find and call you.
First of all, you don't want me fixing your roof. I know that. But secondly, it depends whether the matter's before the court or the rental tribunal to some extent or not, because that has legal implications. But barring that, who is better situated to deal with the city, advocate for you, than your councillor, duly elected? Because the administration answers to the council, not the council answering to administration. So whether it's individually or in the collective, council determines to a considerable extent what happens in this city, at least at a higher level of policy making. So I don't know whether you were involved with the rental tribunal or the courts. It might have been unwise for a councillor to be involved if you were.
That was my second action when she said she couldn't help me.
My belief that if I'm elected, I am being paid by the taxpayer. I am there to work for you. I may not be able to resolve all of the issues that you bring to me, but I will use every bit of intelligence that I have, and that is a considerable amount, and call on every resource I know to help you find the solution to your problem. And not getting your roof repaired for, was it 2 years?
2 years.
That is atrocious. And if I were you, I would be publishing that landlord's name in the newspaper.
The landlord's name is the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and while my roof was leaking, they built a $12.5 million building, and now I'm being evicted.
Well, I think that's definitely something that you should be going to the press about, because that is absolutely appalling.
I'm handing out pamphlets at the end of the show.
Pardon me. As a city councillor, you wear two hats in a way. You represent your people, and you also educate your people about city process, about the laws, the bylaws, how the province actually holds the reins over the municipality with the Municipal Act. There's a lot of frustration with process at City Hall, but that frustration is ill put on our municipality. We need to go up to the province and talk about the Municipal Act itself and how that needs to be changed. So as a city councillor, you represent your people and you also educate them. And Wayne, I think the situation you're in is absolutely embarrassing.
For the city, not me.
Not for you, absolutely not you, but for the city and the Upper Thames. That's appalling.
As a city councillor, of course, my first responsibility is towards the residents. So if anyone comes with any type of situation, a problematic situation, I would turn to the resources and see if I can help in a direct way, or if I can at least orient the person towards the appropriate resource. So certainly the first responsibility of a counselor is the resident, and they need, or the counselor needs to be there for the residents for any problem, even if it's not within the jurisdiction of city council, to orient the resident toward the appropriate resource. Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to squeeze one last question in. Go ahead.
Can you each provide an example from your respective backgrounds of some experience that you have building consensus among a diverse group of people? Thank you.
I could use my business background, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to work into another organization that I worked with. I was president of the Canadian Institute of Management, and we went through a 3-year governance process, of which there were branches across the country that had no desire at all for governance. My job sitting there at that time was not only to sell them governance, but make sure that in that 3-year period that they were up to date on it when we came to voting at the elections last year. And at times it was enjoyable, at times it wasn't, but the reality is the biggest trick is to try and find common ground with everyone, which you can do. Once you've got that common ground in place, it's finishing off, and by the time we were done, we had 16 branches across the country that were all on a governance process.
Well, my experience comes from owning a business for 27 years. I mean, there's a day in and day out where I have to facilitate with the staff, customers, people on the phone, and also with my community. I'm a community leader for my Smiley community. I also have organized certain events, one called the Partnership Walk, which is a nationwide charity that we raise money for women and children in third world country that can't afford clothes or water. So, you know, I've had a lot of experience facilitating a lot of issues and stuff like that, and I think I'll be a great facilitator.
So I guess I've had many opportunities to build consensus, but I'll just deal with one on council. This was the Coves. Many of you know that the Coves is a very important oasis in southwest London, and there was land available to be purchased. Now, some of the more financially prudent members of council opposed spending money on expanding the Coves in London. I, of course, supported it vigorously, and I was able to work with other members of council and the administration in concert with leading members of the community, the Friends of the Coves, as they're called. And as a result, the Coves is probably twice as big in land mass now as it was prior. So I found that an interesting experience, and these goals can often be met by reaching across the aisle.
Trying to think, consensus here. I'm thinking back to an incident when I was employed years ago in Toronto. We had a rather nasty civil litigation case going on that was going to cost our client probably several $1 million if they lost. And we were negotiating with co-defense counsel trying to get out of the case, and they were not budging. I sat down, went through the documents, and found what we call the proverbial smoking gun. Presented that at a defense counsel meeting the next day, and they all agreed very nicely to let our client out of the case without costs. So that is the way I would approach situations on council, is with facts and figures and logic.
So my best example of consensus building was actually a matter of planning went before council this past term. It's a large-scale development coming into our neighborhood. At first, our neighborhood was very negative about it. We thought it was not going to fit in with our neighborhood. We thought it was just going to be the worst thing in the world. So what did I do? I sat down with my community and said, let's look at this. The climate at council at this moment, this is going to pass. How can we leverage this? What can we get out of this for the community? What we did, we sat down and got our concerns, and then I sat down with the developer and said, these are the concerns of our community, these are the things we need. What can you do for us so that we can support you in return? And it actually was a very good working relationship. We got access to the river, we got community space in that development, and going forward, our community stood behind them at council and said, we support this.
I worked in an institution that had thousands of students in language courses. And at one point, they were losing students, and it was due, apparently, from the reports we were getting, it was due to the poor quality of teaching. And the administration wanted to fire a certain percentage of teachers and have them replaced. So there were meetings, and what we came up with was to, instead of firing everyone, try and upgrade their teaching, not qualifications, but their teaching abilities. Organize workshops to give them the tools to improve their teaching and retain their students. And I was part of that.
I could talk about the rigors of budget deliberations. I could tell you lots of interesting stories, and that's all about consensus building, but I'm going to draw on my theater background. I've been involved with London Community Players for many years, and I've, over the years, probably produced 5 shows. Consensus building, or achieving consensus, is about sharing a common vision. So when you put a show on stage, to get a successful show on stage, what you need is to have everybody working towards the same goal and the same purpose, whether it's cast, the different components of the crew, the director. It all comes down to making sure that every individual has that same vision and the same show to put on stage.
So, very last question. You've been out late at an event downtown. You want to continue the political conversations. Where do you go to raise a pint? Just kidding. We won't make you pick favorites. Let's give all of our candidates a huge round of applause. This has been a great event. And also a big thank you to all of you for coming out tonight, to the Urban League of London, to Women in Politics, and to the library. Thanks again for coming, folks. Good evening.